Hello everybody and welcome back to Crime Fiction Solved. I'm your host, researcher, self-appointed literary analyst and crime fiction enthusiast Anna Thornton, and here's where I take a deep dive into history's most influential and most popular crime fiction stories. Today I want to delve into the iconic and innovative aficionado Arthur Conan Doyle, and in particular his novel The Sign of Four. Many of you may be aware, Doyle is most known for his character of Sherlock Holmes. He's an eccentric, superhuman, drug-abusing detective who values rationality and hard evidence above all. He's a perfect contrast to his sidekick, Dr. John H. Watson, who also acts as our narrator and guide throughout the novel, but we'll talk more on this later. I want to first give a brief overview of the novel's background and plot, but of course without spoilers, because you know this podcast is a spoiler-free zone. The Sign of Four was written in 1889 and was the second feature novel of the character of Sherlock Holmes. The novel contains two mysteries that our detective must uncover. One, what happened to Captain Arthur Morstan, and two, who has been sending Miss Mary Morstan, his daughter, these really expensive and equally mysterious pearls. Our story begins with Holmes injecting cocaine and Watson chastising him over this frequent drug use, to which Holmes defends as, quote, "I cannot live without brain work. What else is there to live for?" End quote. So we can already see the type of person Holmes is, and Doyle establishing in just the first few pages the dichotomy between Holmes and Watson's personalities and morals. Holmes is nihilistic and Watson is a romantic. Watson functions as an ordinary person, while Holmes turns his nose up at the mundane and needs to be high just to get through existence without mental stimulation. A young woman, Mary Morstan, presents Holmes with a peculiar case. What happened to her father, Captain Arthur Morstan, who was an officer in an Indian regiment and suddenly disappeared from a hotel room, and then the annual delivery of a, quote, "very large and lustrous pearl," end quote, to her address, the latest delivery bearing a letter requesting a meeting between Miss Morstan and the unknown pearl sender. Of course, Holmes jumps on the opportunity to solve this intricate mystery, and Watson is not only happy that there is a case to delay Holmes's drug addiction, but also to help out Miss Morstan, who he later falls in love and proposes to. Our mystery takes us through the back alleys and slums of Victorian London, on a boat chase across water, and following a dog in hopes to solve a seemingly impossible case. The mystery is inevitably solved by Holmes with what seems to be minimal mental effort, a testament to his deductive skills and connection of random clues to produce a magnificent timeline of events and a description of the perpetrator, even down to a peg leg. Keep in mind that during the 1800s, CSI and detective work were in very primitive stages. Fingerprinting had only just begun, and they mainly relied on psychological profiles of criminals to catch people, leading to many wrongful convictions and unsolved crimes. Think Jack the Ripper. So in saying this, you can really see how Doyle shot to iconic levels, as Holmes captured the minds and attention of readers globally. For a man to have the knowledge and reasoning that finds the truth in anything, given the slightest and most insignificant clue, is superhuman. And this is clearly demonstrated with the pocket watch belonging to Watson at the beginning of the novel and follows through right to the finish of the novel. A major theme that I want to cover within this novel is rationality versus emotion. Holmes versus Watson, essentially. Their mindsets are so different and very unique to the characters, but yet they meld together and work together to create the most beautiful story and relationship between the two characters that piggyback on each other and lean on each other in times of crisis within the novel. Holmes is razor-sharp, witty, untainted by emotion, and demands that his work rely on fact and evidence. Holmes looks down on Watson for indulging in human sentiments and even reprimands him for, I want to say, ruining the integrity of his last case by, quote, tinging it with romanticism, end quote. From 1800 to 1850, Romanticism was at its peak, with creators such as William Blake, William Wordsworth, and Caspar David Friedrich, redefining literature and the arts for the time. However, scientific discovery began a rapid progression in the 1860s, with scientists like Charles Darwin, Humphrey Davy, and Michael Faraday rewriting the course of history and what it means to be human in an intellectual and literal sense. Because many Victorian English natives started waning from romantic to scientific literature and prospects, authors needed to adapt in order to survive, which is ironic given the recent discoveries of Darwin, but I digress. We can see this battle of intelligence versus imagination throughout the novel within our two main characters, as Doyle echoes his struggle with remaining relevant in a society that is growing to value fact over passion. This is also where the literary historian and theorist Franco Moretti joins the party. In his article, The Slaughterhouse of Literature, published in 2000, he theorizes a phenomenon that is Darwinian in nature and is said to determine the success of a book. Moretti states that Doyle knew how to evolve the literary device of clue, used in crime fiction to create an information cascade in which his novels generate societal buzz and thus remain relevant. However, this is still up to debate whether Doyle's success comes from his reutilization of the literary device of clue, or much rather, which Moretti fails to account for, his characterization of Holmes and the relationship between Holmes and Watson. Now, if you thought I had no evidence to back up these claims, you are sorely mistaken. I have scoured the novel for quotes highlighting this theme of intelligence versus emotion, and have found a few that support these ideas of mine. In Chapter 2, Miss Mawson has just stated her case to Holmes and Watson and has now left their lodgement. Quote, "What a very attractive woman," I exclaimed, turning to my companion. He had just lit his pipe again and was leaning back with drooping eyelids. "Is she?" he said languidly. "I did not observe." End quote. Holmes is so cemented in his rationality above all else mindset that attraction, companionship, and perhaps even sex don't interest him, as they are all frivolous byproducts of human emotion. Watson does not agree with this compliancy in solitude and teases Holmes, calling him a, quote, automaton, a calculating machine, end quote. They clearly do not agree with each other's preferred lifestyles, one entrenched in cold calculation and hard fact, and the other open to humanity's full range of complex emotions. In Chapter 6, while investigating the crime scene at the Pondicherry Lodge, Holmes and Watson theorise how this crime could have possibly been committed in the classic locked room trope. Quote, "How often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." End quote. Holmes is the speaker here, and it is evidence that this somewhat iconic line of reasoning he states here has been echoed to Watson many times. Perhaps Watson has a hard time buying this sort of deductive reasoning, as the answer you are often left with is insane and couldn't be the truth, based off his knowledge of humanity and how humans prefer to function. Holmes, however, sees not the capacity of humans, but rather follows the trail of evidence and deems it the truth based on that alone. He is most often correct, of course, but it is always based on a wild scenario that couldn't possibly have happened. Watson trusts Holmes, though, and so does the reader, because it does make sense. And when has he been wrong? In the case of rationality versus emotion here, rationality clearly wins. Finally, in Chapter 12, after the case has been solved and our dynamic duo find themselves once again in their shared residence, there is time for reflection. Quote, "You have done all the work in this business. I get a wife out of it, Jones gets credit. Pray, what remains for you?" "For me," said Sherlock Holmes, "there still remains the cocaine bottle," and he stretched his long white hand up for it. End quote. A bittersweet ending for our main characters here. Watson's preferred mentality, erring on romanticism, has clearly paid off, and he's propelled his life forward. He is now a husband and will soon likely be a father, following the societal norm of familial structure and living. Holmes, however, is back where he has started, mirroring our opening chapter, in a chair, high on cocaine, to dull his perplexing mind as there is now no case to keep him stimulated. It is a sad thing to see, one character continuing to evolve and the other remaining stagnant. But this is Holmes's choice, and he seems to enjoy the solitude within his intelligence-only safety net. It is evident that rationality and emotion both have their time and place, where one outweighs the other, but in life, balance between the two are essential. That is why Watson and Holmes work. They are the yin and yang of both sleuthing and living. But with Watson now married and leaving Holmes as an isolated bachelor, he is at the mercy of his own devices, with no voice of emotion to guide him. And Watson too. Who will be his voice of reason? Alrighty guys, that's enough from me for now. Now we're going to take some questions from the viewers that you, the listeners, have submitted on our Patreon. First up, we have a question from Jamie, and Jamie asks, "Hey Anna, I wanted to ask, are Watson and Holmes gay? I really get that undertone, especially at the start of the novel. What do you think?" And right off the bat, really good question, very interesting question. And from my first reading, I also got those undertones, but as you read further on, you can really see how heterosexual Watson is. I mean, he falls in love and marries Miss Morstan. I have a quote here for you as well. Quote, "A wondrous subtle thing is love, for here were we two, who had never seen each other before that day, between whom no word or even look of affection had ever passed, and yet, now in an hour of trouble, our hands instinctively sought for each other." End quote. These two had barely even known each other, and they feel connected already. They can depend on each other. It brings into the question of soulmates and true love as well. Can two people who don't really know each other be that in love? Remember, this book and this mystery is only over the course of maybe a week. These two met and married within that time, which is not uncommon for the 1800s. A bachelor, bachelorette, it's a very easy match to make. Now, for Holmes, I really think he's just not all that interested. He's just more interested in mysteries, and I think that's where his true love lies. I can see Holmes and Watson living together causing some confusion for the readers, but this is not one of those historians say they were best friends moments. It was not entirely uncommon for bachelors to live in a house together, much like you and I have roommates today. Holmes and Watsons were by no means wealthy. They were middle class, but they still needed to live together in order to get by. So, in short, no, they are not gay. Thank you so much for your question, Jamie. And now we're going to go to the next one. Now we have Ruth, and she is asking, "Love the podcast, Anna. My favourite episode was your Gone Girl breakdown. But anyway, my question is Holmes really that good of a detective, or is he just lucky?" Thank you so much for your kind words, Ruth. I really loved that episode as well. It's my favourite book. But anyway, back to Sherlock. Interesting question, and this has definitely crossed my mind as well. I do think luck plays a big role in Sherlock Holmes's detective capabilities. But is that luck simply just lucky, or is that part of his superhuman mindset? Like, is he just a lucky person and that's what makes him a good detective? Or is he just a mediocre detective that gets lucky? In the scene where they're following the dog's scent of smell, leading them to a possible lead or the suspects, Holmes says, quote, "What a lucky thing we have had no rain since yesterday," end quote. So luck does play a big role in his investigations, and like the rest of humanity, Sherlock is either impaired or blessed with luck at the universe's pleasure. So what if it had rained? Would he have come to the same conclusion that we got in the story? Or what other means would he have used to solve the mystery? I'm sure he would have figured it out, because I trust Sherlock's detective skills. But it is an interesting thing to think about, what route he could have taken, and would it have led to the same conclusion, the same suspects, or would the case have just remained unsolved? Really, really good question there, Ruth. Thank you so much. And that's all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you so much for listening again. If you want to support the podcast, please look at the Patreon. This comes with exclusive updates, links and discounts to all the novels I talk about, and you can ask me questions that I can cover on podcasts. I have been your host, Anna Thornton, and this has been Crime Fiction Solved. Thank you so much for tuning in, and check out Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of Four if you really want to get more into this mystery. Thank you so much. Bye.